What a headshot! What a head!
How's it guys, this is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. In this video, I'll be taking you guys through my ultimate guide to the upcoming Game Week 35. Now Game Week 34's double game week is going to conclude tonight. We have Brighton taking on Manchester United. Hopefully the players that you guys do own end up performing, or at least starting, unlike what we saw yesterday with that Man City rotation. But this video will purely focus on the upcoming Game Week 35. The deadline is going to come up on Saturday slightly later than usual, as we are missing that first initial kickoff. Now topics covered in this ultimate guide are going to be the usual stats review. I'm then going to switch things up, go over the differentials, as with 4 game weeks left of the current FPL season, it's time to go different to rise up the ranks. So what teams to focus on, what players to focus on, I'll be detailing some of my favorites in this ultimate guide. I'll then give you guys a preview of the current Callum vs Isaac Newcastle striker debate. I know most of you might be making that choice next week, but if you guys are making it this week, I wanted to give you guys some context. Then finally, as we always do in these ultimate guides, going to finalize the Camsey debate. Is it as cut and dry as Erling Haaland, or is there another alternative if he does get benched? I'll be covering all these topics in this specific video, so that's something you guys are interested in. Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So going over the stats review, as I always do, going over the attacking stats and the defensive stats. Over the past couple ultimate guides, I've switched things up. I've gone on the left hand side since the restart, so that's from game week 17 to the current game week. And the right hand side is going to be the last 6 game weeks at a minimum. Now I say minimum, and you guys are probably tired of me saying this, but 6 games at a minimum. Some teams have played 6 games, some teams have played more than that, up to about 10 games because of the doubles and the blanks. Now please remember, we do have a fixture tonight, Brighton taking on United. I'll be detailing these teams in these stats, but after tonight, these stats might change. So going over the attacking stats because they're slightly more interesting than the defensive stats, and my stat of choice for attack is going to be XG non-penalty. Now this week we saw quite a few penalties, especially for Liverpool and Mo Salah. I've eliminated those from my attacking stats as they're not that sustainable. So an example of this is going to be the XG per game. As I mentioned on the left hand side, it's going to be from the restart, which is game week 17. So Brighton are currently, since the restart, having the best attack in the Prem at the moment, 2.14 XG non-penalty per game, followed closely by Man City and then Liverpool. Now Liverpool are tied with Newcastle at 1.81, we then have Arsenal and United at 1.73 and 1.71. Now generally these attacks we all do own. I just think it proves that Brighton keeping hold of those attackers, your Matomas, your McAllisters, your Solly Marchers, is integral, especially with those doubles coming up for Brighton. Then Man City are always a good attack to get on if you can't predict who's going to start. Then Liverpool, Newcastle, Arsenal and United, we're probably going to vary these assets as the game weeks go on. Now jumping to the right hand side, pretty much the same teams, but over the last 6 game weeks, you guys can see these are the best attacks. Brighton up top with 2.53, so their attack has been better over the recent form than from the restart. We then have Newcastle the second best attack, which is what you guys want to see as you are approaching that Newcastle double game week. And I'll talk about Isaac and Wilson a little bit later on. We then have United and Manchester City and Liverpool, before finally rounding off with Bournemouth with a massive 1.71 for the newly promoted side. So we have seen a resurgence in that Bournemouth form. The main reason they're not in the relegation battle, they are actually playing pretty good attacking football at the moment. And if you guys do want to play a Kepa this week, I'd maybe advise against it. So if you guys can get a Dom Solanke, want a cheap kind of striker, I'd definitely look at him, as Bournemouth's attacking stats, as you can see, are pretty strong. Now yet again, this kind of proves Brighton, Newcastle double game weeks coming up, definitely jump on these assets. United as well, Man City. These double game weeks could be absolutely massive. Now because we go over the best teams, let's go over the worst teams, and these will be teams to target from a defensive point of view. For example, on the left hand side, let's just say that your defense is playing Southampton. The chance of a clean sheet should be pretty strong, and this might help with those benching dilemmas. So you have Southampton, Nottingham Forest, Wolves, Fulham, Crystal Palace and Leeds as the worst 6 attacks since the restart. And that's kind of the reason that most of these sides are in the relegation zone. Now as mentioned, if your defenses are playing these teams, the chance of a clean sheet should be pretty strong. On the right hand side, we can see a continuation of Southampton as the worst attack over the last 6 games at a minimum, followed by Wolves, Fulham, Nottingham Forest, Brentford and then Everton. Now Brentford's an interesting one for me because they're always such a strong attacking side. Just think of an Ivan Toney and a Mbumo. These players usually are on good attacking form, but over the last 6 game weeks, we see Brentford have had a drop off, and who plays them this week? It's going to be Liverpool. So it does fill me with a little bit of faith as a kind of Trent owner, hopefully get some defensive form, but Liverpool's defense isn't that great. And Everton also a team that are facing Brighton, kind of a popular team that we all do own, Sofia Stupinan does keep a clean sheet. Now let's switch things up, go over the defensive stats because these are quite important. We're going to go over XG conceded. Now I have included penalties here because I just feel if a defense is conceding a lot of penalties, they should be included, unlike the attack. So the best defense over the restart, no surprise, is going to be Man City. But what happens with Man City? Good defensive stats. If Ederson's not benched, he starts and concedes 1 goal, which is super annoying. But as mentioned last night, Ederson was benched. Man City finally kept a clean sheet, but obviously we didn't get any points. We then have Chelsea, Newcastle, Brighton, Brentford, and finally Crystal Palace, which is a little bit of a switch up from the regular kind of strong defenses. I'm looking at Brentford and I'm looking at Crystal Palace, as both those two sides we don't own many of the defenders. But at least we do own a couple of the better teams. Then on the right hand side, over the last 6 games at a minimum, we've got Man City up top with 0.64, and then kind of the explanation why Crystal Palace have creeped up the defensive rankings, as over the recent form, they're the second best defense in the Prem. Now yes, their games might have been easier, but Hodgson since he's come in has done a massive job. We then have Aston Villa, Newcastle, Chelsea, and then finally Brighton. So if you guys do own an Alex Moreno, that's quite a good sign. So if you guys are looking to take maybe a punt on a defensive position, maybe you need some value, want to downgrade kind of an expensive defender to a cheaper one, I'd definitely look at some of these teams that you see on screen. But the more exciting part is going to be the worst defenses, because from an attacking point of view, you guys know on the differential punts, you want to go for attackers because that's where the highest ceiling is. So all of these teams will be teams to target from an attacking point of view. Get the strikers, get the midfielders that are playing these teams, because the chance of a haul is pretty strong. So on the left hand side, since the restart, Everton are going to be top with 1.82, followed by Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest, newly promoted sides, then Leeds, Leicester and Fulham. Now the sides on the left hand side are going to be similar to the sides on the right hand side, except we now have a switch up in order. Over the last 6 games at a minimum, Everton up top with 2.22. They follow closely by Leeds, and then we can see Spurs, and Spurs is a surprising one, as well as Arsenal. So the North London teams aren't doing too well from a defensive point of view, and I mentioned this, if you guys do want to go for an Isaac or own an Isaac already or a Callum Wilson, this Arsenal fixture might not be that bad, especially when you consider the fact that Gabriel has been at centre back for most of these games, and now he's also out injured. So combine that with Newcastle's good XG non-penalty and Arsenal's bad XG conceded, Newcastle could actually be favourites. In between them, they have Nottingham Forest and Southampton as projected, but hopefully the Brighton assets start on the weekend, because Everton are the worst defence recently. Now I don't want to make you Leeds fans even more kind of sad, but the fact of the matter is they are playing Man City this weekend, and that could be an absolute goal fest. But I'll talk about that a little bit later on when we consider these Man City differentials, as I do think that 2.2 XG will be increased after this game week. That's going to kind of wrap up our stats review for this ultimate guide. As mentioned, though, definitely target these teams and these defenses for those differential punts, as now's the time to do it. If you guys do want any other stats, just go over to Fantasy Football Fix, go over to the Opta Stats Sandbox. They have a ton of stats that you guys can also look at. The kind of takeaway from the Game Week 35 stats review is going to be the fact that the Brighton assets, I want to keep hold of them for these upcoming doubles. The Newcastle attack, I should jump on. And finally, Spurs and Arsenal might be teams to target from an attacking point of view. Now switching our attention to kind of a main portion of this video, with 4 game weeks to go, we want to get some differentials into our team, and I'll be suggesting some teams and some plays to potentially look at. Now the first thing I want to say is please don't kind of not captain Erling Haaland because you guys want to be differential. Obviously if you think that a Mo Salah scores more points than him, like a game week 34, that's 100% fine, but don't go different just for the sake of it. I can't tell you the amount of times that people have gone different with a Campsy, with a transfer, it doesn't pay off, and they turn around and kind of regret it because their differential didn't end up getting points. So please be super careful, high risk, high reward strategy, but I'm pretty sure some of these differentials are going to be worth the value. Now the first team I want to talk about is going to be a team that's massively improved under a new manager. It's going to be Crystal Palace. And I'm going to bring up their last 4 fixtures from Game Week 35 to Game Week 38, and you guys can see why I'm suggesting them. Now I do know Game Week 35 might not be the game week to bring these assets in, but you guys would have just seen the Spurs defense is not looking too great. But then after that, Bournemouth, Fulham and Nottingham Forest, so all 3 newly promoted sides back to back to back. I do think Crystal Palace could score a few over the next few game weeks. Now the biggest thing about them is obviously they don't have a double game week. I definitely prioritize your Newcastle players, your Brighton players, that sort of thing. But if you guys are looking to take a punt on a single game week option, I think a Crystal Palace asset could be the one. Now the 2 assets I've selected are going to be Eze at 2.55% and then his colleague just come back from injury, Wilfried Zaha, at 0.00%. So that's right, 0 people within the top 100k, so these metrics are going to be for the top 100k ownership, so not one manager in the top 100k does own Wilfried Zaha. In terms of Eze, slightly less differential but super differential still at 2.55 as mentioned. Now if you guys do want to go for an Elisa and Ayew, 100% fine, but the thing that kind of excited me about Eze was the fact that he was on penalties in the prior game. So if you add that to his already goal scoring form, assisting form, I do actually like him at his cheaper price point. But as always, if you guys do want to go for a Crystal Palace option, Wilfried Zaha is usually the man to look at, but he is slightly more expensive. But out of these 2 assets, definitely differential to look at over these next 4 fixtures, which you've just seen are pretty lovely. Now the one thing I want to note about Crystal Palace is the fact that they are currently safe from relegation, and they seem like one of those sides where if they don't have any pressure on them, they absolutely ball. So let's see if that is true over the upcoming game weeks, but I'm definitely keeping my eye on them, but probably won't go for them because I'm focusing on the double game week options. That's probably going to be the case for you guys as well, looking at Brighton, Newcastle, Man City assets, but I guess if you guys do have a free transfer to spend, maybe look at one of these two. Now the next talking point I want to go over is going to give you guys a slight preview of the kind of Isaac versus Callum debate, as I'm probably going to be making this move next week. Now currently in terms of ownership, Isaac's more heavily owned at 27.8%, whereas Callum comes in with just above 1% ownership. So if you guys are looking for a differential, I definitely am currently looking at a Callum because of that lower ownership, and I just like him more in that central position. Now the thing about these two strikers is there seems like there's going to be some rotation over the next couple of game weeks. It seems like Isaac starts the one game, Callum starts the next game, but I actually believe when they're played together, they're even better. So let's see what Eddie Howe does do in game week 35 against Arsenal, and that's why I'm prolonging this move for 1 week, as I do get 1 game week of information. But if you guys are forced to make this choice this week, I want to go over this talking point to help you guys make the right call. So what I went and did was I went over to Fix and I took from the restart, so yes, that's going to be from game week 17 to the current game week. This might not be the most fair comparison, but I'm going to be going for per game averages and also per 90-minute averages. So in terms of per 90 minutes averages, that's going to be the top kind of stats review. You can see that Callum has played a slightly less minutes than Isaac has, but has started more games. Now you guys are going to have XG non-penalty there, XG of the team, XA, X the clean sheet, which is pretty useless. But the one you want to look at is the far right expected FPL points. What that does is it kind of converts the XG, XA into FPL points. So this stat is going to tell you how many FPL points they should have got per 90 minutes played. You guys can see that Callum has a higher average 7.5 compared to 6.7 of Isaac. Now both these two options come in at the same price, so obviously you guys want to go for the high expected points. But what I want to show you guys now is going to be the per game averages, and what this does is it kind of takes whether they were subbed on, whether they started the game, and what they would have scored in each of those games. So for Callum it'll be divided by 15, whereas Isaac divided by 14, and you guys can see that Isaac comes in with the higher expected games FPL points. Now it is quite close, 4.42 compared to 4.22, but what I wanted to show you here is from now to the end of the season, Isaac might start, Isaac might be benched, Callum might start, Callum might be benched, but over those benchings and starts, these are going to be the averages. But if you guys can kind of predict who's going to start both games over the upcoming doubles, then I always do favour Callum if he does get the same minutes. But unfortunately it's not the same case there. I think that Isaac probably gets more minutes because of Callum injury history, and I think he'll have his minutes managed a lot more. Now what my current thinking is, if you guys want to follow the same plan as myself, is I'm going to wait for next game week. If we do get early team news about Newcastle, they play the first game of the game week. Whoever starts that Leeds game, I'll be looking at, as that's the better fixture than the Brighton one. But if you guys do make a choice this week, I'd probably go Isaac as he is slightly more safe. If he plays against Arsenal, probably a good chance of also playing in game week 35. But I thought this kind of stats comparison was super useful. It kind of tells us that if both options do play the same amount of minutes, Callum is the better option. But in terms of per game averages and starts versus benchings, Isaac is slightly better. Now adding that to the kind of differential aspect, Isaac is the safer option to go for, but I personally am looking at Callum and know if I can get him next game week. Now the last team I want to talk about from differentials is going to be Man City, and you might be asking me why Man City differential. Well, the fact of the matter is that Man City options are always kind of differential because it's quite hard to predict who's going to start the fixtures. So the nice thing about Man City this week is that they do play the first kickoff. There's going to be 4 games that do kick off, and Man City play one of them, and that's going to be that Leeds at home game. So what I'm hoping for is that we do get early team news about Man City, because whoever starts that game, I'll probably be bringing in as a differential punt. The big talking point might be Erling Haaland. If he does start, if he's benched, that's going to change your team entirely. You might go for a different captain, you might bench Erling Haaland, but I'm going to focus on more the differentials. So if you guys did watch the game this week, obviously Man City had the double game week, Ederson was benched. I'm expecting Ederson to come back into the lineup, at least hopefully as I am owner. Now Man City do have a pretty fit kind of starting 11 in terms of attackers. We have Phil Foden, Mahrez, and also Jack Grealish. Now the first option I want to talk about is going to be Alvarez, because with KDB's injury, wasn't in the squad last night, so we don't exactly know what's happening with Kevin De Bruyne. But if he is going to be out for another game week, I do expect Alvarez to start. Now if KDB is going to be training tomorrow, that sort of thing, I do expect KDB to play some minutes, as they're going to prepare for that Real Madrid game in the midweek. But my punt for kind of game week 35 will probably be Alvarez, as he's an easy transfer because he's going to replace a forward. Now another asset that you guys could also look at is going to be Phil Foden. He comes in with a less ownership of 0.18 compared to Alvarez 1.81. But both these two assets are quite differential, so if you do get news that one of them starts or both of them start, they're equally as good a differential to bring in. Now if you guys do have a midfielder slot, let's just say that Jack Grealish does come out that he's going to be benched, he's an easy switch to a Phil Foden or a Mahrez. Now I've selected Foden as he is slightly more differential, and I do expect maybe Phil Foden to have a better chance of starting, as he can play on the left or right wing. So these two assets will be my differential picks from Man City. This all depends on, do you guys have a forward spot to replace, do you guys have a midfielder slot to replace? For my own team, probably a forward spot, so I'll be going for Alvarez. But comment down below, you guys can obviously go for Mahrez if you want to. Who's the Man City differential that you guys are looking for or hoping for that we do get early team use that they are going to start against Leeds? Now please just make sure for those press conferences, because if Pep comes out and says that KDB is going to be playing or KDB is back in training, I do worry slightly about Alvarez's minutes, but he was subbed early last night. Now the last talking point I want to go over is going to be all about Camsey, and I know what you guys are probably saying, it's Erling Haaland. I do agree with you, but if Erling Haaland is not going to start, we have to go for an alternative. Now we just come off the talking point about Man City. You guys know we might get early team use, but I'm pretty sure that Erling Haaland should play the game, but I don't think he's going to play the full 90 minutes. But if he does start the fixture, I can't really see myself not captaining him, so definitely look at him if or even if we don't get early team use. Now the number one alternative will probably be Mo Salah. I know that he's not on the best of form, has scored 2 penalties over double game week 34, not getting the most of chances, but this is Mo Salah at home against Brentford. Now Brentford have had better defensive stats, as you would have seen in the stats review, but I do like Liverpool at home in terms of attacking. So Mo Salah is probably the best replacement in terms of Erling Haaland, but if you guys do want to go for an alternative, an Alvarez, a Foden, a Grealish, that sort of thing, that's also 100% fine. Now the last option to look at is going to be between maybe a Harry Kane and a Rashford. I've gone for Harry Kane because he's been super consistent this FPL season. Now Crystal Palace at home is a tougher game on paper. We just saw Crystal Palace's defensive stats over the last 6 have been pretty strong, and Spurs aren't playing the best football at the moment. But even though Spurs aren't playing well, Harry Kane's still getting the points, as you'd have seen over the prior game weeks. But as said, Rashford, Harry Kane, those are kind of differential punts to go for, but I think most people will be on Erling Haaland, and his effective ownership will probably be pretty high. My current plan for Camsey is probably if Erling Haaland doesn't start and we get news that Alvarez does, I'll probably captain Alvarez or go for Mo Salah. Comment down below who's your captain going into the upcoming game week. Is it anyone different to Erling Haaland? And if Erling Haaland is benched, who's your backup plan? But that's over the video, guys. Hope you did enjoy it. Please like if you didn't subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow for the team selection, so make sure that your bell notifications are turned on. But I'm myself, Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.